In 1948, America saw a car that looked as if it had arrived by mistake from the future. Its engine was in the rear. Its windshield was designed to pop out in a crash, so it would not slice into passengers. Its dashboard and steering area were shaped with injury reduction in mind. Its roof was reinforced, and between the two headlights sat a strange central lamp that turned with the steering wheel to light up the road ahead in a curve. The idea was almost unsettling for its time. This car was not built merely to move people. It was built to protect them. That sounds like the beginning of a triumph. Instead, it became the beginning of one of the most controversial stories in American automotive history. The car was mocked. Its creator was prosecuted. His company was broken apart before it could truly begin mass production. And the machine itself became one of the most famous ghosts of 20th century industry. Preston Thomas Tucker was born on September 21, 1903, in Michigan. His father was a railroad engineer who died when Preston was very young, and he was raised largely by his mother, a school teacher. From childhood, Tucker was not simply interested in cars, he was consumed by them. He learned to drive young. As a teenager, he was already buying used cars, repairing them, improving them, and selling them for profit. Tucker did not follow a tidy educational path. He worked as an office boy for Cadillac and famously used roller skates to make his rounds faster. That sounds like a small detail, but it reveals something essential about him. Even then, he was trying to speed up the system around him. He later joined the police force, not out of deep civic calling, but because he wanted access to powerful motorcycles and fast police cars. His mother had him removed because he was underage. He worked at a gas station, he worked on the Ford assembly line, he sold Studebakers, he left jobs, returned to them, and moved restlessly through the automotive world. In the 1930s, Tucker became increasingly drawn to auto racing, especially the Indianapolis 500. There, he met Harry Miller, one of the most respected racing engine designers in America. Together, they formed a company to build race cars. Then came war, and once again, Tucker sensed an opportunity before the rest of the market had fully adjusted to it. While recovering in a hospital in the late 1930s, Tucker read about the growing threat of war in Europe and began thinking about a new kind of armored combat vehicle. This became the Tucker combat car, sometimes called the Tucker Tiger. The military did not adopt the vehicle as a whole, but they were interested in one part of it, the powered gun turret. And Tucker was not simply imagining inventions, he was patenting them. His powered gun turret led to years of patent disputes over rights and royalties. Long before the Tucker automobile, he was already navigating the difficult relationship between invention, patents, and institutions. That pattern would return. The end of World War II created a strange opening in the American auto market. The country had won the war. The public was ready for prosperity, modernity, and change. People wanted the future in material form, but the major automakers had not rushed to completely reinvent the car. Tucker saw the opening immediately. On March 15, 1947, he received credit as inventor on the Tucker automobile's design patent. And that is why the Tucker became more than a machine before it even became a stable product. It was an image of the future. When the Tucker was first shown to the public, it looked radically different. Low body, streamlined profile, a shape that suggested speed even at rest, and above all, safety as a central principle. Now look at the car from an engineering perspective. The padded steering wheel and dashboard were intended to reduce impact injuries. The reinforced roof anticipated rollover protection. The windshield was designed to separate outward in a crash, rather than become a cutting hazard inside the cabin. And the central headlight, the famous Cyclops eye, turned with the steering angle to improve night visibility around corners. And perhaps the most surprising detail, Tucker even considered seatbelts in the 1940s. But they were removed, not because they failed, because consumers found them alarming. Think about that. A life-saving invention was considered too unsettling to sell. Sometimes the market does not reject bad ideas. It rejects ideas that arrive too early. But this is where the story becomes more complicated, because he was not a flawless genius building a perfect machine. The Tucker also suffered from one of the most common startup problems in technological history: too many new ideas at once. Tucker originally envisioned a highly ambitious technical package: a rear engine, direct drive, advanced suspension, disc brakes, fuel injection, a low-profile, safety-oriented body, an entirely different layout from the conventional American car. As deadlines tightened, Tucker's team had to simplify. Some features were dropped, some were revised, some were replaced with solutions that were more achievable in the available time. Most notably, the original engine concept was abandoned in favor of a modified Franklin aircraft engine. That choice made sense in one way. Aircraft engines can offer a strong power-to-weight ratio and compact packaging advantages. But aircraft engines and car engines live in very different operating environments, and adapting one to the other created major compromises. Then came the most dangerous variable of all: money. To build the Tucker at scale, enormous capital was required. Tucker secured access to an enormous factory in Chicago, a former wartime plant built for aircraft engine production. The giant factory made the company look real, and that mattered. Tucker began raising money through dealership rights, accessories, and stock offerings. But there is a thin line between funding a bold industrial vision and selling a promise that has not yet become a stable product. That line is especially dangerous when you are challenging entrenched power. The Securities and Exchange Commission began scrutinizing Tucker intensely. The press picked up the story. Critics seized on the fact that early prototypes were unfinished and rough. Every technical delay became public evidence, not of development, but of suspected deception. In 1949, Tucker faced trial. Now, the question was no longer whether his car was visionary. The question was whether the entire enterprise had been fraudulent from the start. And this is where the story becomes truly haunting. For all the chaos, all the delays, all the over-promising, and all the improvised development, Tucker and his associates were acquitted on all counts. Legally, he won. Industrially, he had already lost. You can win the argument and still lose the moment. By then, the company was exhausted. Debt had mounted, trust had collapsed, lawsuits accumulated. The production system never reached escape velocity. Only a small number of cars were completed, not thousands, not even hundreds, just a few dozen machines that today look like fragments from an alternate future. After the trial, Tucker did not entirely give up. He remained optimistic, tried to pursue another automotive project in Brazil, and continued imagining what might still be possible. But by then, the conditions were no longer the same. The early opening was gone. The momentum was broken. The dream had become heavier than the system could carry. In 1956, Preston Tucker died at just 53 years old. So why does his story still matter? Not only because the car was beautiful, not only because the story fits the myth of genius versus the system, it matters because Tucker represents something more specific and more unsettling. He represents the moment when the future becomes visible before it becomes viable. Many of the ideas associated with his car later became mainstream, or at least directionally influential. Safer steering areas, greater attention to passenger protection, more thoughtful crash behavior, the notion that a car should not merely perform, but also preserve life. Many of Tucker's ideas survived. Safer interiors, protective thinking, the idea that a car should help preserve life. Preston Tucker may have failed commercially, but some inventors do something stranger. They do not own the future. They force everyone else to move toward it. And that may be Preston Tucker's real legacy.